Hey friends, what up? Welcome back to Babylon Talmud. Today we're studying Daf Lamed Ches, Daf 38 of Masechta Yevamos. My brother just walked through the door. He was away. He was camping. So we might, maybe he'll come and pay us a visit or something. We'll have to see. But in the meantime, he hasn't paid us a visit, and we're going to study Daf Lamed Ches, Daf 38 of Masechta Yevamos. Daf 38, we continue at the beginning, talking about this kid who doesn't know who his father is, right? Is it Reuven? Is it Shimon? And inheritance and things like that. And then we get to a new Mishnah. In the new Mishnah, it talks about what happens when if Sarah is Shomeres Yavam, she needs to do Yibum with Shimon, but that they haven't done Yibum yet. And then she gets an inheritance, and then how does that fit into things? So very exciting sugis here on Daf Lamed Ches Masechta Yevamos. Let's jump in here about 6 lines into the daf. So it says Sofik v'Yovam shebo lachlok b'nichsei sovo. Friends, what does that mean? It means that so you have this kid, right? Because what happened? Reuven was married to Sarah, and then Reuven dies, right? And then Shimon, so he then does Yibum with Sarah, but it turns out that Sarah is pregnant, and we don't know who the baby belongs to. Is it Shimon's baby or is it Reuven's baby? And therefore, then the question arises that what happens if Yaakov dies, right? Meaning, who is Yaakov? Yaakov, of course, is the father of Reuven and Shimon. So what happens when Yaakov dies, and now it comes to divide up his estate? So if this child is Reuven's child, so then this child will inherit his father, Reuven, and then there's Shimon, so they split up Yaakov's inheritance 50-50. But if this child is Shimon's child, well then Reuven's dead, doesn't have any children, so Shimon gets everything. So says the Gemara, Sofik v'Yovam, so this child, we're not sure who the father is, v'Yovam and Shimon, Shebo lachlok b'nichsei sovo, that now they're coming to divide up the inheritance of Yaakov, the grandfather. Sofik Omar hagava b'misnu ufal gadidiu. So this child says, well, I'm Reuven's son, and therefore my father is entitled to half of my grandfather's inheritance, so I get half. Yovam Amar, whereas of course Shimon argues, Ad baroi didiat, what do you mean, kid? What do you mean, son? You're my child. V'leis loch v'loi midi, and therefore you get nothing. Because if you're my child, so then, my father only had 2 kids, me and Reuven. Reuven's dead, he has no children, because you're my kid. I get everything. Have a Yovam vade v'sofik sofik, v'in sofik motzu midei vade, says the Gemara, well, the Shimon definitely, is an inheritor, right? Shimon is certainly entitled to some inheritance, as he's definitely the child of Yaakov. Whereas this child, we don't know who the father is, and therefore he's a suffix, right? If he's Reuven's child, so he gets half. If he's Shimon's child, he gets nothing. At least not until Shimon died. So he's a suffix, and we say ve'in suffix motzu midei vadai, that a uncertain situation is not able to sort of override a certain situation, and therefore this child is unable to collect part of the inheritance. Now says the Gemara, Sofik uvne yovam shebo lachlok b'nichsei sovo. Okay, so now what happens if you have Shimon's kids? So Shimon has 2 kids, and then there's this child who's not sure if he's a third brother of Shimon's kids, or if he's Reuven's child and Reuven's not alive. And now they're coming to divide up Yaakov's inheritance. Okay, I don't know, maybe both Reuven and Shimon died, and then Yaakov died, and now they want to divide up the inheritance. So, Sofik uvnei Yovam, so Shimon's 2 kids, as well as this child who doesn't know who his father is, Shebo lachlok b'nichsei sov, and they want to divide up Yaakov, the grandfather's inheritance. So Sofik Amaru Gava Bamisnu Ufal Gadidiu. So of course this child says, look, my father is not your father. My father is Reuven. And therefore, our grandfather Yaakov had 2 kids, Reuven and Shimon. I representing Ruvain get 50%, and you two fellows representing Shimon get the other 50%. So I get the entire 50% to myself, and you guys split the 50% amongst yourselves. So excuse me, Amri, whereas of course Shimon's kids say, what are you talking about? Achunat, you're our brother. Umanosa islach ba'adon, and come, we'll divide up the inheritance with you. But by doing that, so if they say that Reuven doesn't have any kids, and that this child is their brother, right, is a child of Shimon, their brother, well, in that case, then they would be dividing Yaakov's inheritance 3 ways, and each one gets a third, right, as opposed to the way that the other child wants to argue, which is that he's Reuven's child, in which case he gets half, and the other two get 25% each. They want to argue that no, we're all children of Shimon, and therefore we each get 1/3. So palga digha modi lihu shakle. So what they do is, so you divide up the inheritance into 6 parts, and it says palga digha modi lihu. So the 50% that this child admitted belongs to Shimon's kids, so shakle, so they get it, right? Meaning this child admitted that he's the son of Reuven, and that the other two, as the sons of Shimon, get the other 50%. So they could take 50% at least. Okay. Tilsa de kamodu le shakal, and the 2 kids, said to this third kid, like, you're our brother, and therefore there are 3 of us, and therefore we're going to divide our grandfather's estate into 3. We each get a third. So they basically admitted to this kid that he's entitled to a third. Okay. So remember, if we divided this into 6 parts, so this child had admitted to the other 2 that they're entitled to 50%, so they get 3 parts. They admitted to this other child that as their brother, he's entitled to 1/3, so 2 parts. So these 2 brothers get 3 parts, and this other kid gets 2 parts, which means that 3 and 2 is 5, and out of 6, that means that there's 1 part left. Pashlu danka, so there's 1/6 left. Having mammon muto b'safik, at which point it's money that is disputed, v'cholken, and they just divide it evenly. So basically what ends up happening is that the 2 brothers get 3.5 parts, and the other brother gets 2.5 parts to himself. Okay, well, what am I going to tell you? Sova v'yovam, if you have the grandfather plus Shimon, benichse sofik. So what if you have, right, so I guess this child dies. So now Shimon and his grandfather, right, this child's Shimon and basically his father, Yaakov, are trying to figure out how to divide up the inheritance of this child, right? Because if he's Reuven's child, so then Yaakov inherits him. If he's Shimon's child, then Shimon inherits him. Oh, Sava v'Savik b'nichse yavam. Or if Shimon dies, and now, right, and Shimon doesn't have any other children, and now it depends. If this child is the son of Shimon, so then the child gets it. If this child was the son of Reuven, so then Yaakov gets Shimon's possessions. So here also it's simply disputed money. They don't know who gets it, and therefore they simply divide it in half. Friends, moving on to a new Mishnah over here. And Daf Lamed Ches Amud Aleph says the Mishnah, Shomeres Yovam Shenaflu La Nichosim. Okie dokie. Now there's going to be a number of ways to understand this Mishnah. So I guess we'll maybe understand it in the meantime as generically as possible. So we're talking about a situation, friends, where Reuven is married to Sarah, and then he dies. Okay, fine. And then, so now there's the brother Shimon. Now Shimon and Sarah, of course, need to do Yibum, but they haven't yet done Yibum. Okay? So now, Shomeres Yavam, so Sarah is kind of waiting to do Yibum. Shenaflu la nechasim, and she gets an inheritance. Alright? So Modim Beis Shammai uVeis Hillel shemocheres v'nosenes v'kaya. So both Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel agree that she could do whatever she wants with the inheritance that she just inherited. She could sell it, she can gift it, she could do whatever she wants with it. Mesa. However, if she dies, right, so now what happens? She was a Shomeres Yavam, and then she has this inheritance, and then she dies. So ma yeyasa bichsubasa. I'm sorry. So I'm sorry. Mesa, if she dies, ma yeyasa bichsubasa. So what do we do with her ksuba? Right? Meaning, there was ksuba money from Ruvain. Right? When Ruvain died, she collected ksuba money. Now she was a shomeres yavam. She needed to do yibum with Shimon, but she didn't. And so there's this money that she got from her ksuba. Who does it go to? Right? She now dies. Does it go to her father? Does it go to sort of her inheritors? Does it go to Shimon? After all, right? There was like a zika between her and Shimon. Maybe someone should go to Shimon. So, or what do you do with the... Whoa. What's going on out there? It sounds like dogs are getting excited. So, and what do you do with the nichse mulug? Friends, who can tell me what nichse mulug are? Nichse mulug did we have this the other day maybe? That, I think so. That this is the property. Yeah, we definitely had it the other day. This is, excuse me, property that she brings into the marriage. Let's say she brings in like an apple orchard. So she brings into the marriage, and when the marriage, and then afterwards, if they get divorced or he dies, whatever it is, she takes back the orchard, right? Whether it appreciated in value, depreciated in value, it doesn't matter. She gets it back. In the meantime, the husband is allowed to chaparain the fruits. So what happens when she dies? She's a shomeres yavam, and she dies. So then, who gets these properties? Again, is it her estate? Is it the Shimon get it because of the zika? So Beishamai Omrim say Beishamai Achloku Yoshei Abalim Yoshei Ab. So Beishamai says that the inheritors of Shimon and the inheritors of Sarah's father, it's basically her estate and Shimon's estate. It's 50-50. It's a dispute, and each gets half. So Basila says no. The properties just stay with whoever has them now. Ksuba b'chezkas Yoshei Abal. The ksuba, right? Her ksuba, which is the money that she received when Reuven died, stays with her estate. I'm sorry, ksuba b'chezkas Yoshei Abal. That the ksuba stays with the inheritors of, right, with Shimon's estate. So the ksuba remains with the inheritors of the husband of Shimon. The properties that right, the nichse mulug, they stay with, these properties stay in the in basically the Sarah's inheritors, Sarah's estate. Konsa, now if Shimon and Sarah did yibum arei ki ishtal chodavar, well then she is considered his wife in every way. Uvajte ksubasa anichse baila harishon, but that the ksuba payments remains in the estate of her original husband of Reuven. And the Gemara is going to explain what exactly this means. So now, affect the Gemara. You hear the kasha? The Gemara wants to know, how come in the first part of the Mishnah, Bisham and Basil agree, right? It says, Shomeres Yavam, you have Sarah, he hasn't done Yibum yet, she gets an inheritance. So, Modim, Bisham and Basil both agree, she could sell it, she can gift it, she can do whatever she wants. Yet when it comes to when she dies, all of a sudden, Bisham says he split it in half, Basil says that whoever has it in their possession keeps it. Why is it a machlokas in the Sefer but not in the Reisha? So says the Gemara. Let's read that question again. Mashna Reisha de lo plige. How come in the first part of the Mishnah Bisham and Basil agree? Umashna Sefer de plige. And how come in the second part Bisham and Basil disagree? Omra Ula. So comes Ula and listen to what he says. Reisha de nafla kishi arusa v'Sefer de nafla kishi nesua. Friends, do you hear that? That the first part of the Mishnah is talking about that her relationship with Reuven was that they were engaged. They weren't actually married yet. They were engaged. Whereas the second part of the Mishnah is talking about where Reuven and Sarah were actually married. So to do that again, Amar Ula says Ula Reisha Dunafla Kshi Arusa, that the Reisha, the first part of the Mishnah, is talking about she gets this inheritance when she's a Shomeres Yavam, right? But she was never actually married to Reuven, she was engaged to Reuven, and then Reuven dies. She hasn't yet done Yibum with Shimon, and she gets this inheritance, and everyone agrees she can do whatever she wants with it. V'sefer Dunafla Kshi Nesua, whereas the second part of the Mishnah is talking about where she got this, where she died, and meaning Reuven and Sarah were married, and then Reuven dies, and now Sarah needs to do Yibum with Shimon, and then Sarah dies, and we're trying to figure out what to do with her estate. Because over Ula, and Ula holds Zika Sarusa Osa Safik Arusa, that the Zika between an Arusa, right? So in the ratio we're talking about where Reuven and Sarah were engaged, Reuven dies, now the Zika between Sarah and Shimon creates, in this case, a status of a Safik Arusa, of like a doubtful, I guess, Arusa, right? So she's like Kilu, doubtfully engaged, I guess. Zikas Nesua, whereas when Reuven and Sarah are married and then Reuven dies, so the Zika between Sarah and Shimon is that of a Safek Nisuin, right? A sort of doubtful, I guess, marriage. Right, so Zikas Nesua also Safek Nesua. So Zikas Arusa also Safek Arusa. When we say that when Reuven and Sarah are engaged and then Reuven dies, now the relationship between Sarah and Shimon is that of a Safek Arusa. Di Sagadaitech Vade Arusa, because if you would say that the Zika between Sarah and Shimon is that of a certain, a definite Arusa, we treat it as though they're mamish engaged. Well, Modem Beis Hillel shemucheres v'nosenes v'kayim. But in that case, would Beis Hillel agree with Beis Shammai that she could simply sell the inheritance or give it away, and that would be okay? But we learn in the Mishnah that if a woman gets engaged and then she gets an inheritance, and so Beis Shammai says Beis Shammai Timkor. Beis Shammai says she could do whatever she wants with it. She could sell it if she wants, no problem. Beis Hillel Lo Simkor. And Beis Hillel says no, she cannot sell it. But both Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel agree that if she did sell it, then that would be fine. So our Mishnah is suggesting lichatchila that she's allowed to, right, that she could sell it, she could gift it, she could do whatever she wants with this inheritance. Now, if she was engaged, like mamish engaged, so then Beis Hillel would say that she's not allowed to sell it and do whatever she wants with it. So, from the fact that the Mishnah is saying that Beis Hillel is on board with Beis Shammai, that she could sell it, gift it, do whatever she wants with it, it must be that we do not treat the relationship between Shimon and Sarah as mamish engagement, rather as like a Safek engagement, and that's why Beis Hillel says in this case, she can sell it and do whatever she wants with it. Ela Shmamina Zika Sarusa also Safek Arusa. So we see that the Zika between Shimon and Sarah, who was engaged to Reuven, so the relationship between Shimon and Sarah is that of a Safek Arusa. Zikas Nesua also Safek Nesua. When we say that the Zika, that when Reuven and Sarah are mamish married, and then Reuven dies, and then there's a Zika between Sarah and Shimon, so that Zika is a Safek Nesua, Safek Nesuin. The Sagadaitech Vada Nesua, because if you would say that they're mamish married, Beis Shammai Omim Yachloku Yorshe Abal Im Yorshe Ab, right? Right, in the Seifa of the Mishnah, which Ula said is talking about where Reuven and Sarah were married, and then Reuven died, and then Sarah died, and now we're saying that her inheritors and Shimon's inheritors divide up the estate equally. Now, if we're saying that it was mamish engagement, if it was mamish marriage, right? If we say that when Reuven was married to Sarah, and then Reuven dies, and now the Zika between Sarah and Shimon is that of mamish a marriage. Well, if that's the case, would Beis Shammai say that the inheritors of Shimon and the estate of Shimon and the estate of Sarah essentially would divide it up equally? But we learn in a Mishnah that if she gets property once she's married, Eilu Veilu Modim, both Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel agree, She'im Machor V'Nosno, Shabal Motzim Yad Alakuchis, that if she sold it or gave it away, the husband would be allowed to extract it from the purchasers, right? Meaning, if they were mamish married and then she got this property, it would belong to the husband. So Shimon wouldn't have to divide it with her estate, right, with her inheritors. Elishmamino, zikas nesua osa safek nesua. Rather, it must be that the zika between Shimon and Sarah is that of a safek nesuin, and that is why they divide it equally. So now Rabbah comes with a alternative, right? He argues on Ula and gives an alternative understanding of the Mishnah. Amar Rabbah. So now Rabbah says to Ula, "Ada miflige begufa ula achar misa lifligu bichayeh uleferis." So we had explained that the machlokas between Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel is when she is dead. And it's talking about specifically in a situation where she was married, but the Reisha is talking about where they were only engaged. But it says, Rabba, ad miflage begufa ulachar misa, if we're, right, when Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel are talking, are arguing about the property itself, right, the property itself, and after she's dead, liflagu b'chayehu leferis, why can't you say that it's talking about when she's alive, and the question is just who has access to the fruits? That Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel say that the access to the fruits, the Beis Shammai says that they divide it up evenly, and Beis Hillel says that they're hers, right? Meaning she's alive right now, and they have, right, she's a shomeres yavam. So Beis Shammai says that Shimon gets part of it, she gets part of it, whereas Beis Hillel says that they're in her possession, she can get all of it. So Elamar Rabba rather says Rabba idividi denaflik shinesua. No. So rather it says Rabba that both the Reisha and the Seifa, right? The Reisha when she's alive and she inherits this property, as well as the Seifa when she's dead. So it's talking about when she and Reuven were married. They were mamish married. And then Reuven dies. V'zikas nesua osa safek nesua. And the zika now between Sarah and Shimon creates a safek nesua, a safek marriage. Okay. Now, Reisha di'i kaima. So in the first part of the Mishnah, when we're talking about where she is alive and she gets this inheritance, so Havla ihi vadai v'inu safek. Well, she is a vadai, right? She was married to Reuven. Reuven's dead. She hasn't done yibum with Shimon yet. Now she gets this inheritance. Well, it's definitely hers. And in terms of Shimon, we say it's only a safek nisuin. So he's a safek, she's a vadai. Vein safek motzi midei vadai. And his safek claim of safek nisuin is not able to, right, is not more powerful than her claim, which is that it's definitely hers, right? That she has this inheritance, and therefore she can do whatever she wants with it. Whereas Seifa, right, the Mesa, in the second part of the Mishnah, when she's dead, halolu baron lirash v'halolu baron lirash v'achloku. Well, in the second part of the Mishnah, Reuven is right. Reuven's. In the second part of the Mishnah, where she's dead, her estate's coming to divide it up. Shimon's coming, right? Her estate wants it. Shimon wants it. So they divide it in half. That is what Beis Shammai says. Eis ve'abai. Now Abai asks a kasha on Rabbah. What does he ask? Beis Shammai and Safek Motzi Midei Vadai. Oh, does Beis Shammai really hold that Safek is not able to be Motzei from Vadai? Right? We say in the Reisha that both Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel agree that when she inherits his property, so she definitely has it, whereas Shimon is only Safek Nesuin. So he's a Safek, she's a Vadai, she can do whatever she wants with it. But does Beis Shammai really agree with that? Right? So again, Abai asks a kasha against Rabbah. He says, Beis Shammai and Safek Motzi Midei Vadai. Is it really true that according to Beis Shammai, a Safek is not able to be Motzi from a Vadai? Ve'otnan. But we learn in the Mishnah, Nafal Abayis Olav, Val Oviv, Olav Val Morishov, Vayu Olav Ksubas Isha Uval Chov. Friends, you hear this case? Who could tell me what this is talking about? It's talking about a situation where you have Reuven, and Reuven, he's got some creditors. He owes some people money, and you got his father Yaakov. Now, excuse me, Yaakov, he has, right, Reuven's broke, but Yaakov has some assets. Now Reuven also has some brothers. Now Reuven and Yaakov are in the house falls down, and tragically Yaakov and Reuven both die. So now the question is, if Yaakov died first, the father died first, well, right before Reuven died, well, technically when Yaakov died, Reuven inherited his father, which means that all of a sudden he now has assets for the creditors to collect from, and they can come in and collect. Whereas if Reuven dies first, so then he died broke, and then when Yaakov died, Reuven was already dead, and then Reuven's brothers now can claim Yaakov's entire estate. So, right, but if Yaakov had died first, well, then the creditors go to the brothers and they say, well, we're entitled to some of the estate because it really belonged to Reuven before he died, and we want to collect it. So we have this case of Nafal Abayis Olav Val Oviv. So if a house falls down on Reuven and on his father Yaakov, Olav Val Morishav, or him and other people who he would inherit, Ve'hayu Olav Ksubas Isha Uval Chov, and he has to pay a ksuba to his wife, or he needs to pay other creditors. Yoshea Av Omrim. So of course, Reuven's brothers argue. Haben Meisvishon. They say Reuven died first. Ve'achar kach Meisav. And only afterwards did Yaakov die. Which means that when Reuven died, he was completely broke. He never inherited his father. Then when Yaakov dies, Reuven's brothers get Yaakov's entire estate. Uval Chov Omer, whereas the creditor makes the exact opposite argument, which is Ha'av Meisvishon, that Yaakov died first, which means V'achakach Meisaben, and then Reuven died, which means that right before Reuven died, he inherited his father Yaakov, which means that he had a portion in Yaakov's estate, and therefore the creditors are able to collect that portion from Reuven's brothers. Beishamai Om Yachloku, and Beishamai says that they can't, right, that they divide it up equally. That the creditors and the brothers have to divide up this money equally. Beisil Omim, whereas Beisil says Nechosun B'chezkoson, that the property remains where it is with the brothers. But in this case, the inheritors of the father, right, Reuven's brothers, are a vada, right? By default, all the property of their father goes to them. Uvalchov Safik, right? The Balchov, he needs to first go to Bezdin. He has to prove that they really owed the money, and therefore, the brothers definitely have a claim to the property. The creditors argue that they have a claim to the property. So we have a suffix and a vadai, and yet because the suffix mostly de vadai, and yet excuse me, and yet Beishamai is saying that the suffix claim of the Balchov is enough to extract 50%, right, to be treated equal with the brothers, and they can extract 50% of the claim. So, and for the Gemara, this case is a little bit different. Kasavi Beishamai shtar omi ligabus kigabu domi. That a document that stands to be collected is as though it's collected, right? These creditors have in their possession a document documentation that says that Reuven owed them money, and therefore it's as good as collected. And therefore this is not a situation of suffix, right? What was the suffix? The suffix was, well, it hasn't been collected yet, right? The vadai is that these brothers inherit their father. The suffix was, well, this guy now has a claim that, he's arguing that he's owed money. Well, let's see if he's really owed money. But the thing is, it's more than that. He has documentation proving that he's owed money, and therefore that's as good as collected, and therefore it's a vadai and a vadai, or really a suffix and a suffix in this case, right? Because we don't know who died first. So the brothers are saying that Reuven died first. The creditors are saying that Yaakov died first. And it's basically, he said, and therefore they divide, right? They divide it up equally. And how do I know that Beis Shammai holds this way? That Beis Shammai really does hold that that a document that stands to be collected, it's as though it is collected. Titnan is benoted in the Mishnah Mesu by Lein ad shelo shasu. Oh, if you have an episosota, right? A woman who is warned not to seclude herself with a particular fellow, and she does so, and now she has to drink this sota water. So if she needed to drink this sota water, and then her husband dies under under unclear circumstances. Anyways, he dies. Beis Shammai so say Beis Shammai, notlos ksubason ve'enon shosos, that they can collect their ksuba and they don't drink the sota water. Vesil omim o shosos o notlos ksubason. And Vesil says, look, either they drink the sota water and then they can collect their ksuba, or they don't, right? Olo notlos ksubason. Alternatively, they simply cannot collect their ksuba, right? If they drink the water and they're innocent, then they can collect the ksuba. If they don't drink the water, then they cannot collect the ksuba. In fact, the Gemara, oh shosos, what do you mean they could drink the water? Their husband is dead. The Torah says in the context of sota that the husband brings his wife to drink the water, but he's dead. So how could he bring her to drink the water? Elo mitoch shelo shosos lo notlos ksubason. No, rather, what Basil is saying is that because they're not going to drink, they will not drink this water since the husband is dead. So therefore, they cannot collect their ksuba. Now, the question is, over here, when it comes to this case of the sota, the suffix suffix zanoi, suffix lo zanoi, right? Here it's a suffix, right? We don't know. Did this wife have a relationship with this fellow or not? We don't know. So it's a suffix. V'ka'asi suffix umotzi midei vadai. And the suffix of whether they had this relationship or not seems to be overpowering the vadai, which is that her husband's estate is in possession of this money, right? And now they have this money; they definitely inherit, right? This husband who died, and now she's coming, and she may or may not be a sota, and yet Beis Shammai is saying that she can collect her ksuba from the inheritors who have it right now. So rather, it must be that the fact that she has a document saying that she's entitled to money, it's as though it's already collected, and therefore it's not a situation of suffix b'motzi midei vadai. Rather, she definitely has a claim to it, and therefore she can collect it. So that's how we see that Beis Shammai holds that shtar omed legabris kegabri dami. Now, fact the Gemara v'Abaye lo svei meha. So the Gemara asks, how come Abaye chose to ask the kasha about suffix b'motzi midei vadai according to Beis Shammai? How come Abaye chose to ask the kasha from the situation of Yaakov and Reuven and the house falls down on them? Why not bring it from this situation of sota, right? Meaning the kasha from sota is that apparently it seems like suffix is b'motzi midei vadai, to which we said no, that shtar omen the gabus k'gober dami b'seder. But why not? Why is Abaye bringing the question from the house that falls down? Why not prefer to bring the question from the sotas? And as Rashi points out, after all, Yevamos, of course, is in Seder Noshim, and the sota is in Seder Noshim. Why bring a question from Seder Nezikin? So, and for the Gemara, Dilma Ksubas Isha Shiny Mishum Chino. Well, maybe the reason why, maybe we could say that it's not really, it's a less strong question from the sota, because it's the context of ksuba. And by ksuba, we want to, as Rashi, right, we have this concept of chino, that we want to entice women to get married. We want the women to get married, so we kind of like, take it easy. We're lenient on ksuba payments, and we give special treatment to ksuba payments to make sure that women are always get their payments, so that they it will smooth out the path to marriage. And therefore, maybe I'll think that the reason why these women will get paid their ksuba, even though there's a suffix, maybe I would think it's specifically a ksuba related thing that we want to, sort of make the process as smooth as possible for women. So therefore, maybe that wouldn't be a good case to bring, and that's why preference would be to bring the case of the house falling down. Velozve ksuba dimas nisin. So in our Mishnah, we had said, right, if we take a look at our Mishnah, what does it say? It says, Mesa, that if she dies, right, so if she was married to Reuven died, and then Sarah dies, so then, so what do you do with her ksuba money? So we said that Beis Shammai says what? Yachloku Yorshe Bal Yorshe Av. So her family and Shimon's family divided up. Now in that case, it's a situation of suffix, right? We said that the zika between Shimon and Sarah created like a suffix marriage. So it's unclear, right? So her family is sort of making an unclear claim of maybe they were married, and right, maybe they're entitled to the ksuba or not. And Shimon has a vadai claim, which is that he's in possession of the money right now. And their suffix claim seems to be, right, and Beis Shammai says that they split it 50-50. So their suffix claim seems to be, at least equally as strong as the vadai claim of Shimon. So lo pligi. So the Gemara says, no, Beis Shammai actually agrees in that case, when it comes to the ksuba, that they would not divide it up 50-50. Vilo, what Beis Shammai says, right? Beis Shammai does not say in that case that they divided up 50-50. V'akatani. It says in our Mishnah Mesa that if she dies, so then if she dies, what do you do with her ksuba, and what do you do with the nichsei milug? Beis Shammai says you divide it in half. And Beis Hillel says that the property remains with whoever has them. So what do we see? So we see that Beis Shammai does seem to be saying that when it comes to the ksuba, they divide it 50-50, even though it's a situation of suffix and vadai. So the Gemara says, no, this is how you understand the Mishnah. Mesa, if she dies, so what do you do with her ksuba? And then the Mishnah just kind of moves on, kind of asks the question and doesn't answer it. Instead, it moves on. That now, when it comes to nichsei milug, Beis Shammai omrim yachloku Yosheh Bal Yosheh Av. That is where Beis Shammai says divided up her family with Shimon's family. Beis Hillel omrim nichosim b'chez kason. Whereas Beis Hillel says that it remains with whoever has the property. So we see actually Beis Shammai does not say that when it comes to her ksuba they would divide it up, because that would be a violation of the principle of suffix being motzi midei vadai. That suffix really is not motzi midei vadai. Rav Ashi says masnisin namideka, that you can also infer this from the Mishnah itself. The Katanis, it says yachloku Yosheh Bal im Yosheh Av, that the inheritors of the husband, right, Shimon, divide up with the inheritors of Sarah's family, Sarah's estate, meaning that applies to the nichsei milug, right? Because the nichsei milug are in her family's possession, and therefore, that's why it makes sense to say that Shimon is basically dividing with her family who currently has it in their possession. It does not say that the inheritors of her family divides it with Shimon, which would be the case if it was talking about the ksuba, which is in his possession. Shmamina. So we see that the division is really only by the nichsei milug. It is not by the ksuba. All right. Well, that was Daf Lamed Ches of Masechta Yevamos. So the first part of the daf, we continue talking about this child from Shimon, who we're not sure if it's Shimon's child or Reuven's child, and how exactly that turns out when they're dividing up different inheritance. So if you have Shimon and this child, they want to divide up, let's say, the grandfather's estate. So if it's Shimon's son, so then it all goes to Shimon, because Reuven's dead and he doesn't have any children. But if this child is Reuven's son, so then Reuven gets 50%, Shimon gets 50%. So we had sort of questions around that in terms of how to divide up the estates when we don't know the estate, when we don't know if this child is Reuven's child or Shimon's child. And then we got to a new Mishnah which discussed what happens if Shimon and Sarah have not yet done Yibum, and then she gets an inheritance, or if she dies, right? What happens to these properties? So we saw the opinion of Ula, who says that there is a difference between if Reuven and Sarah were engaged when Reuven died, or if Reuven and Sarah were married when Reuven died. That the first part of the Mishnah, which says that if Reuven died and then Sarah gets an inheritance, she can do whatever she wants with it. That's because they were only engaged at the time, and when Reuven dies, so there's like a suffix engagement now between Shimon and Sarah, but in the interim she could do whatever she wants with that property. If Sarah dies, though, as it talks about in the next part of the Mishnah, that is talking about when Sarah and Reuven were actually married. And in that case, it creates a zika between Shimon and Sarah, like a suffix marriage. And in that case, Beis Shammai says that Sarah's family and Shimon divide up her property 50-50, whereas Beis Hillel says that the property remains with whoever has it right now. Rabbah disagrees, and he says that actually both the Reisha and the Seifa of the Mishnah are talking about when Reuven and Sarah were married. However, the first part of the Mishnah where she's alive, so then she definitely has access to this property, to the inheritance, whereas Shimon only is a suffix marriage, and therefore she can do whatever she wants with it, because Shimon's suffix is not able to override her vadai. And the Sefer, when she's dead, well then her family makes a claim, Shimon makes a claim, so Beis Shammai says that they divided 50-50, whereas Beis Hillel says that whoever is currently in possession of it holds on to it. Abaye challenged Rabbah about if it's really true that Beis Shammai holds of ein suffix motzi midei vadai, and we basically created another distinction, which is when you have a document that needs to be collected, so then it's already as though it is collected, as we saw in a particular case regarding creditors who are trying to collect a debt from Reuven, and we're not sure if Reuven actually had access to the property that they're collecting from. We say that they split it with Reuven's brothers, because the document that they are in possession of is as though it's already collected, and they can use it to make a claim against the brothers. Well, friends, that is Daf Lamches of Masechta Yevamos. Hope you enjoyed. Peace out.